All right, good evening, everyone. Let's go ahead and open tonight's Planning Commission hearing or meeting. Doreen, can I get roll call, please?
Yes, President Feeney.
Present.
Vice President Hu.
Hello, Doreen. Present.
Commissioner Brooke.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Present.
Commissioner Quinones. Commissioner Quinones. Alternate Commissioner Sarman.
Present.
Commissioner Roberts. Commissioner Roberts. I see you, Commissioner Roberts, but your microphone might not be on.
I'm not hearing anything. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, so it's my somewhere.
Okay. Alternate Commissioner Shuck.
I'm here.
Okay. Commissioner K7.
I'm here.
Okay, worst case, I move to a laptop.
Commissioner Watson.
Here.
And Commissioner Whitehurst.
Hello, present.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Doreen. Do we have any communications to report from our last, since our last meeting? One meeting or kind of neighborhood outreach that we were part of was Washington Square Regional Center, was held last week. Commissioner Watson was on that as well. I appreciate you attending. She's representing the Planning Commission on our behalf. I'm actually on the consultant side of things. So it was a great little update with some neighbors, business members, the consultant team and the city, just to give an introductory to the update, get some ideas of what are pros and cons for the Washington Square Regional Center, which commissioners, if you realize, it's not just the Washington Square Mall, it's both sides of 217, kind of goes up north and includes the Red Tail Golf Course as well. So it's a fairly large area, as well as the Metzger neighborhood. And the next tracks on those ones will be starting to look at new planning, zoning, and things like that. And the commission will get back together probably, or I should say the committee should get back together early next year for the next meeting. Commissioner Watson, was there anything else to add on that?
I think your Commissioner Feeney, I think your description was very accurate and thorough.
Thank you.
But yeah, I am very happy to be participating in that.
Okay, moving on. Let's go ahead and consider our meeting minutes from our last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review those, and are there any changes or edits that we need to be making? Okay, I hear none. Doreen, I'll go ahead and get those signed and send those to you after this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to our public hearing portion of this. I'm going to open up our public hearing, and this is for CPA 2020-00001 and zone change 2020-00001, an amendment. I believe Planner Lindor has an update for us on this one.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Agnes Lindor, Associate Planner. And actually, staff asks Planning Commission to continue this public hearing on this matter until September 14th. Staff is working with the applicant still to resolve some issues related to the transportation planning rule analysis. So that's the reason we would ask to continue it into the September 14th date.
Okay, thank you, Agnes. Since we don't have anything to review and the city staff has asked us to continue this hearing, do I have a motion to continue to September 14th? Commissioner Roberts, you're on mute. There you go. Oh.
I'll move that we continue to the 14th.
Do we have a second?
I second K7.
Thank you, K7.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All opposed? I hear none. Motion for continuance to the 14th is approved. Thank you. Moving on to the next one, I believe we're going to have a River Terrace West and South update from Senior Planner Warren.
Good evening, Chair Feeney and Commissioners. I'm Skylar Warren, Senior Planner in the Department of Community Development. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm using headphones and hopefully they don't have a short in them. I've got a slideshow presentation for you and I'm going to share my screen. When I do that, I actually am going to be moving into a parallel computer system, which means I won't be able to see anyone. And I won't be able to see if there's hands raised. So I'll ask that if you do have a question, go ahead and take a moment when I pause to interrupt me so that I can answer that question. So with that, I'm going to try to get us shared here. If you give me just a second. Okay. Can I get verbal confirmation that you all can see this title slide?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes, we can see. Yes.
Perfect. All right. So tonight's briefing is on what we are now calling River Terrace 2.0, a neighborhood for everyone. This first map is not the most beautiful map. First of all, I'm going to apologize because this project is early, in the early stages. We don't have some of the beautiful graphics that we'd like to have for display that you'll see in subsequent briefings. But hopefully these will be clear enough to help get you oriented. The area that's shown in blue here is the current city limits of Tigard. To the north of that is in red is Beaverton, the area known as South Cooper Mountain. To the south there on the kind of lower right-hand side is the city of King City. And then the two urban reserves that we'll be discussing tonight, which we call River Terrace West and South, but are also known as Roy Rogers West and East, to make it extra confusing, are shown there in orange. And you can see that they are not contiguous. A couple of more areas on here to kind of highlight for you. You'll see the thick black line that kind of runs around the city limits there is the metro urban growth boundary. The area to the west of King City, but to the south of River Terrace South, that's got the dashed red line, that is the area known as King City West. That is currently not annexed to the city of King City, but has been annexed into the urban growth boundary and is undergoing community planning right now with the city of King City. And then the areas shown in green are metro designated rural reserves. So if you are not familiar with the concept of urban and rural reserves, those are designations that were given during the Metro-wide process back in, I think, 2012, where Metro, rather than responding in an ad hoc fashion to requests for urban growth boundary expansions, regularized the process by setting aside certain areas as urban reserves that were eligible to be brought into the urban growth boundary, and certain areas as rural reserves, which are not eligible to be brought into the urban growth boundary. It is worth noting one other small item here, which is that part of the reason that Roy Rogers West, or River Terrace West, and Roy Rogers East, or River Terrace South, are not contiguous is there's an area that is has no color there that's between them. You can see to the east of the Washington County Rural Reserve there. That's what's known as undesignated land, and because the process of designating urban and rural reserves was a political process, there were certain lands that were just left undesignated because of I guess some of the process at that time could not resolve how these lands should be designated. So there is an area that is not urban reserve or rural reserve. It is not eligible to be brought into the urban growth boundary, and as such is in many ways a default rural reserve. So I'm going to give some history really briefly on this area. The West Bull Mountain Concept Plan, which was adopted in 2010, was a process that first looked at some high-level concept planning for this entire area. That was a planning effort led by Washington County. At the time, all of this was under Washington County jurisdiction. It took a really preliminary look at the areas that include what is now the River Terrace area and what we're calling River Terrace 2.0. And it was completed prior to that urban and rural reserves program and the Metro changes to the urban growth boundary expansion process. And I'll talk a little bit more about that change later when I talk about the process. So a lot has changed in the process for planning for these areas, and certainly the context for the planning of these areas has changed as development has occurred. In 2014, the city adopted its community, or its River Terrace community plan, and that is essentially the city's comprehensive planning for the areas at that time known as Area 64 and Area 63 and Roy Rogers West, a portion of it, that are now the River Terrace area that is being currently developed, and some of it's already been developed. This community plan, interestingly, was completed after lands had been brought into the urban growth boundary. And then the next kind of step in any kind of planning process that shapes the development of these areas is the process that's led by private developers. There's really only one major developer in the River Terrace area, and that's Polygon Northwest. They've actually changed their name recently to Taylor Morrison as part of an acquisition. They've been acquired by a larger home builder. And those plan developments, which you're familiar with the plan development process, participating in that as the Planning Commission, is the process by which the developer provides a detailed plan for the development of these specific areas that are smaller than the larger community plan area. Currently, some of these plan developments are complete. Others have approval but are awaiting development, and still other areas of River Terrace have yet to be planned for. So this map, you can see the areas that have the slashed lines there. Those are current plan developments that have been approved, and the areas without them do not have a plan development. So this map kind of is a nicer display of kind of the earlier map that you saw, but it gives you an idea of where River Terrace West and South sit in relation to the approved plan developments in the current River Terrace development. So the question is, probably a lot of the community is wondering why now? Why are we taking on the planning of these areas now? Concept planning is a very early stage process in preparing land for development. So it's a really high level look at what the city's goals and vision are for these areas. And it's in line with a council goal that was set in the last round of council goals. And that's goal 3, to ensure that Tigard grows and develops in a smart and equitable manner. And the specific action items related to that the council set were for the city to secure external resources to accomplish all of the planning and outreach activities that we would need to do to prepare a Title 11 compliant application to Metro for urban growth boundary expansion and to annex South River Terrace, and to go ahead and prepare a concept plan for West River Terrace. Now, those seem like they might be somewhat different, but ultimately a concept plan is going to be a Title 11 compliant plan that would allow both of these areas to be brought into the UGB. But what council was saying is that at a baseline, we want to prepare an application for River Terrace South in the next cycle, and we may or may not prepare an application for River Terrace West. Further, the city will direct all the work under this goal, and that was contingent. The entire process is contingent on finding external funding to cover the indirect and overhead costs necessary to make the area development ready. And that is to be funded by private sector partners and through grants prepared at the expense of the private sector partner. And I think importantly, I want to highlight that it's contingent on the inclusion of equitable development principles in the River Terrace planning. One other item that I left out here, and I would be remiss to not include it, is that it was also to not delay or in any other way hinder other city priorities and work programs related to planning. So it would not affect the other commercial industrial project, the Washington Square Regional Center plan update, and the other priorities that the department has. Beyond the council goals, the reason why it makes sense to look at this area now is in the context of Tigard's housing initiatives. As most of you know, the region is still experiencing a housing crisis of unprecedented proportion, and that is ongoing, even in the midst of what we're now experiencing as a downturn in the economy. The housing market is incredibly tight. If any of you saw the numbers that were reported in the media from the past couple of months, housing sales are skyrocketing, housing prices are skyrocketing, and so there's no end in sight to the constraints on housing supply. If anything, it is becoming more competitive out there for housing. So this work will take into account Tigard's housing options code amendments, and many of you as planning commissioners were participants in the process of adopting those housing options. The Tigard Affordable Housing Plan, where we focused on specifically regulated affordable housing, but to some extent also unregulated affordable housing, market rate provision of affordable housing, to ensure that everyone had an equitable opportunity for housing. Another thing that is informing the work is House Bill 2001 and 2003. Those are state level actions. 2001 was the bill that requires all cities in the metro urban growth boundary to accommodate missing middle housing in all areas that are zoned for single detached housing. We are already compliant with that through our housing options code amendments. And then House Bill 2003, which requires cities to take a new and more careful look at their housing needs through updated housing needs analyses. And the city would be required to do that within the next 2 years by the Department of Land Conservation and Development. However, as part of this project, we're going to update that housing needs analysis and be compliant a year to 2 years early. Tigard is also currently undergoing a strategic plan update that is expanding on and adding to the current strategic plan vision to be the most walkable city in the Pacific Northwest, where people of all ages and abilities lead healthy and productive lives. And that's going to take into account several other goals related to equity and health that the city is interested in seeing come to fruition. And we're certainly going to be looking at that as we undertake this process. And, Tigard's equity initiatives, you saw in the council goals that equity and equitable development approach is important to the council. And I don't think that desire has diminished at all. If any of you have watched any of the council meetings, the council is very interested in ensuring that the city has equitable opportunity and that we are inclusive in all of our processes. And then lastly, Governor Kate Brown signed into effect Executive Order 2004 prior to the COVID-19 public health emergency. And that was the executive order related to greenhouse gas emission reductions, and it applies to all state agencies. And as such, it affects the Department of Land Conservation and Development's rules. And it also will affect the transportation planning rule that is implemented by both DLCD and the Oregon Department of Transportation. And we expect that transportation planning rule update to comply with the governor's order will be coming online sometime in fall of 2021. And as such, it is going to have an effect on the community planning process, the next step in planning for River Terrace 2.0. And so we want to get ahead of that by really working to include greenhouse gas emission reduction strategies in the planning now. I also want to point out that we really want to have two big major lenses on this project. And one is equitable opportunity, and the other is the climate change impacts. And, equitable opportunity is, as I said, it's important to the council. It's also important to Metro, and they will want to see equitable approaches and inclusive processes used as part of our planning. And climate change impacts, of course, like I said, the transportation planning rule is an important piece of that, but it's also important to highlight that climate change impacts are disproportionately borne by communities of color and marginalized communities. And as such, climate change mitigation planning and adaptation planning is an important part of any equitable approach to planning. And so I kind of encourage the commission to think about this as two lenses in the same pair of glasses. We are looking at the same project, but we're looking at it with both eyes, and we want to make sure that we have those lenses on to the project. So, and again, apologize, we're really wordy at this stage in the planning effort. Not a lot of beautiful images to share yet, but of course that's coming. So I'm going to move on to more words here to talk to you all about the project goals. So getting a little more finely detailed about what we actually want to see in creating the plan for these areas. First, we want to identify a diverse mix of housing types, and that's in line with, again, those housing goals like the Housing Options Project and the Affordable Housing Plan. But we want to make sure that when we talk about diversity in the housing types, it's not just what type of housing it is. It's the size, and it's the price, and it's the location. And we really want to make sure that we're integrating neighborhoods in a way that not every housing type is clustered together in large groups. We really want to start to break up those large clusters of similar housing and make sure that there is more diversity of housing type in a neighborhood. And that's important not just for equity in the neighborhood. It's important for people to be able to age in place. The idea is that you would be able to, as a city, we have endeavored with the Housing Options Project to allow someone to age in place in the city or hopefully within their neighborhood. But when we're talking about planning from the ground up, as we are with River Terrace 2.0, we really want to make sure that someone can even just stay on their street if they want, like that there is a house where you can buy a starter home and maybe you move up to a larger house on your street as your family grows, and as your family decreases in size, as maybe your children move out later in life, that you can downsize into a home and age in place in that home and have the opportunity to remain with your neighbors. We want to implement a transparent and inclusive process, and we want to, again, make sure that we're getting a wide range of input from community members and stakeholders. Conventionally, these types of urban growth boundary concept planning projects tend to attract a lot of the same players each time who take an interest in those planning processes. And we as a city, and I think generally in the region, we are all trying to do a better job of being more inclusive from the get-go to make sure that we're hearing from the entire community and not just the vested interests that usually participate. We want to create an infrastructure strategy that provides for an efficient extension of services. Obviously, that's an important one to ensure that the city is able to continue to meet its bottom line budgetarily. We want an integrated transportation network that weaves together the neighborhoods that are being planned, any commercial centers that are planned, and parks and open spaces. We want to make sure that that transportation network is multimodal in its approach. We don't want to just focus on vehicle movement. We want to make sure that in line with the strategic plan vision, that this is really a walkable neighborhood and that people have transportation options, including transit. If we can plan appropriately, we hopefully will build a transit supportive neighborhood that would support extension of transit services by TriMet eventually. We want to identify important natural resources that should be protected, integrated into open space. We want to look at a market analysis that highlights what is that right mix of uses for both commercial and residential use. We do want to have some employment areas to ensure that the neighborhood has opportunity for people to be able to travel to work or to get to services without having to hop into the car each time. It is an important part of a transportation network to actually have destinations nearby, and the market analysis will help us identify what kinds and types and sizes and scale of non-residential uses are supportive of the city's vision. And we want to, again, create opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and promote sustainable urban living. We want a development and implementation plan that is achievable. So in other words, we don't want to just go out on a limb and say, hey, this would be great, but in reality, the market can't support it. And that's why those market analyses are so important early on in the project. We want to make sure that it is feasible. And we want to carry all of these objectives forward with a creative and innovative approach that's going to feel unique and inspiring to the current and future residents of Tigard. So this is an example of some of the early work that's being done by the housing team, and I'll talk a little bit more about the housing team, but just to give you an idea of kind of the way we're thinking about this, we're thinking at different scales, both the scale of the different housing types, how the neighborhoods fit together, and then how the blocks themselves are laid out in providing that connectivity. I'm going to highlight just a few things. A lot of this I talked about on that map, but I just, I think it's good to talk about just the things that we're thinking about in terms of context for this concept planning process. And this is in no way an exhaustive list. The list could go on for slide after slide after slide, and I don't think you all want to hear about all of that. But some key examples that I think, kind of give you an idea of the things that we're thinking about. The urban and rural reserves, obviously, and that line between the rural reserves and the urban reserves, because we don't know when or if any of those rural reserves will be designated as urban reserves. And so we really want to think carefully about what that interface is like. Existing development, so on the eastern side and on the southern side, thinking about what's that connection like with the existing River Terrace neighborhood in terms of streets and the neighborhoods and that kind of thing. We want to think about the Tualatin Wildlife Refuge, which I neglected to show on that map earlier, but is at the corner of Beef Bend and Roy Rogers Road, kind of just south of that area that I showed you that is undesignated. South Cooper Mountain is the, like King City West, the area that was brought in recently to the city of Beaverton, and they've recently completed their community plan for that area, and it is starting to develop, and it's the area directly north of Shoals Ferry Road and the current River Terrace. And so it's important that we also are carefully considering the connections and the neighborhood fabric between those areas. Clean Water Services has a couple of plans that they're undergoing right now, including a basin plan for their stormwater system. We obviously want to be very careful and cognizant to incorporate regional facilities in a way that, stormwater facilities in a way that supports their work and is makes sense. And then the Washington County Urban Reserves Transportation Study, if you're not familiar with this, and I don't think the Planning Commission has had an update on this project, but Washington County did receive a Metro 2040 Planning and Development grant to look at transportation planning in the urban reserves, not just in Tigard, but all up and down the urban growth boundary area. And what their goal was to try to get ahead of the planning a little bit and to get a better understanding of what their needs would be, both in terms of infrastructure and budget costing for these transportation improvements, so that they had a more comprehensive look at it, and it was less of the ad hoc look that is done by the concept plans that are developed by each individual city. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of high-end process of how this concept planning process works and how it ties into the greater context of the region-wide urban growth boundary decision. So the first step was to find funding. As you saw, the council goal required that we find external funding, and that was acquired. The first piece of funding was a Metro 2040 Planning and Development grant, just like the Urban Reserves Transportation Study. Those grants are funded by the region-wide construction excise tax, and Metro provided the city with $300,000 to pursue concept planning for these urban reserves areas. And then the second funding piece was a contract with Metropolitan Land Group, which is a brokerage that handles property transfers and I'm not totally sure of what their business model is, but they provide sort of a go-between between the original owner and the eventual developer like Polygon. So they act as a land broker, and they will be covering the balance of the city's costs related to the concept planning. We released a request for proposals in April, and we received 4 proposals back. And in July, we negotiated a contract with one of those proposers, OTAC, and we are now in the analysis and plan development stage, and basically right at the very beginning of it, which is why we don't have a lot of graphics and visuals to show right now. Once that's done, we will go through local consideration and adoption of that concept plan, and that will go the same way as any other legislative action. So it'll come first to Planning Commission, and you'll have briefings on this, and you'll probably have at least a briefing directly prior to the request for a recommendation. And so Planning Commission will have a presentation about that concept plan, and you will make a recommendation to City Council, and then City Council will choose to adopt or not adopt the concept plan. Once that's done, we prepare an application to Metro. Now, this is a little different, and I said earlier that I was going to talk about this because the process has changed a little bit. It used to be that Metro would take applications for an urban growth boundary expansion before concept planning was done, and they would just decide, well, we need, we've done a housing needs analysis and a buildable lands inventory, and we've decided that we do need more land for development. And so they would bring it in, and then the concept planning process would start, and then the community planning process would follow that. Metro changed their procedures with the last round of urban growth boundary expansions that included the King City UGB expansion. And what they said is that, no, actually what we want to do now is we actually want you, city, who's applying for this UGB expansion, to complete the concept plan first. And I think the goal there was for the Metro Council to be able to have more of a look at what was planned for these areas prior to making that decision, and to make sure that it met regional goals. And so, as such, we are completing this concept planning process prior to the application. So after the City Council adopts the plan, we will prepare the application to Metro, and the Metro Policy Advisory Council will make a recommendation, staff will make a recommendation, and then the Metro Council will approve or not approve the plan, and the UGB expansion. Then once that's complete, we will move on to the process of community planning. And then once the community plan is adopted, it's in the UGB. It's been comprehensively planned, but it's not actually part of the city until it's annexed. And the annexation process happens primarily voluntarily, and it's based on opportunity, again, because a land broker will have negotiated the purchase of a property and the sale to a developer, and they will then move on to the private development phase, of which you're very familiar through mostly planned developments, or what we would expect to see in this kind of area. So I'm going to really quickly run through, because I've been going on for a long time and I want to give you all a chance to ask questions about this. I just want to introduce you to the consultant team. Like I said, OTAC is the project lead and is in charge of the parks analysis and the stormwater analysis. We actually have a housing sub-team, which is unique to, I think, any concept planning process that I've ever seen. And one of the reasons that OTAC was selected, and that housing sub-team is led by Works, and they will be developing some of the housing typologies and really integrating that look at the variety of housing types and the mix as part of the concept planning process. And they will be informed by the work that Mosaic does in doing the housing needs analysis. A firm called Structure is going to be looking at the different affordability scenarios. So how can we incorporate regulated affordable housing into this area? And Leland Consulting will be doing a housing market analysis and the commercial market analysis. Pacific Habitat Services is going to be doing the environmental analysis. Murray Smith, an engineering firm, is going to be looking at the water system, and DKS Engineering is going to be looking at the transportation analysis. Project timeline, like I said, April was RFP, contract award in July 2020, and the rest of this is, we have a project schedule that is not very easily displayed in this kind of format, because there's a lot of dependencies, there's a lot going on. So rather than give you that, I'm going to give you the rough kind of timeline here, which is that right now we already have our technical advisory committee formed. We're in the process of forming our community advisory committee. In September, we're going to have the preliminary analyses complete. And in October 2020, the housing team is going to be bringing together the early analysis that they have for housing needs and buildable lands, and the housing market analysis to do a housing charrette and look at how those elements can inform the concept planning process. November, we'll start looking at concept plan alternatives, and that's when we really get into the visual kind of look at things. And in December, we'll have a preferred alternative selection. And then based on that preferred alternative, that will be further developed and final analyses will be done. Planning Commission will consider the concept plan in March, City Council in April, and then the application to Metro is in May for a Metro decision in August 2021. Current activities, we are contacting property owners in the urban reserve areas to request access to their property to do the environmental assessment work. We've sent all of them postage paid postcards for them to reply. We've already gotten, I think, over half of those back, and the team is scheduled to begin work within the next week. If they can't get property access, they have means and methods to be able to do best guess estimates, and then, of course, that those environmental assessments are further refined in the community plan and even during the plan development process. Currently, right now, like I said, we have our community advisory committee member application open. It is open to all, both residents and non-residents, and we do think it's important to include non-residents of Tigard, either people who have been displaced, who might have lived in Tigard at one point, who have been priced out of the housing market in Tigard, or people who aspire to live in Tigard and would be interested in helping to shape a community they would like to live in. We have a focus on diversity and equitable opportunity, and that CAC is going to meet virtually due to the COVID-19 public health emergency in 6 meetings over 8 months. And I would like to highlight that planning commissioners are welcome to apply. We always try to have at least one planning commissioner representative on any community advisory committee that's, informing staff doing planning work. And so I hope that one or more of you will choose to apply. This is always fun work. The address there shown on your screen is a link to the application form, and of course I can email that out to the commissioners after the meeting. So with that and the very image-heavy presentation, I'm going to now switch back over to my base and stop sharing screen, hopefully. And I can reshare if anybody would like me to call up any of those images during questions, but I'm also happy to take questions without showing the map.
Thank you very much, Skylar. Are there any questions with the presentation?
One simple one. What is a charrette?
Great question. Sorry for the jargon there. A charrette is traditionally it's a term of art in the architecture fields where people typically come together and do sort of loose sketching of ideas, and it's a way to get a lot of ideas down on paper in a very short amount of time, and it's a way of sort of communally doing brainstorming and thinking out loud. Unfortunately, with things the way they are, we don't get that tactile experience of being able to sketch things out on paper. So it's going to be virtual, and it's probably going to be less publicly focused than charrettes have been in the past, and it's going to be more for the project team to start to integrate in a visual fashion and maybe just talking out loud about how to integrate the ideas that come out of the housing team's analysis.
Cool, thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments at this time?
Skylar, hi. Just quick question. Is the city's commitment to fight climate change anyway constrained by what the state wants us to do? So, for example, if something happened to the executive order, we're not bound by the state to do something different than our commitment, right?
That's a good question. So in many ways, I would say that the current framework in which the state operates for the transportation planning rule in particular, because of the time that it was adopted, it is very focused on automobiles and movement of automobiles and automobile storage. And in that sense, it is almost singularly ill-equipped to help cities plan for climate change adaptation and mitigation. And I think that's part of the reason that the state is looking at this. And also part of the reason that, that executive order just came out in May, or actually March, I think. For DLCD and ODOT to have a new transportation planning rule in effect by next August is an extremely aggressive timeline, but it's reflective of the fact that they had already been having those conversations, and that process has in many ways already been occurring behind the scenes. And I know that when the Land Conservation and Development Commission met in Tigard last year, they were discussing the update to the transportation planning rule and how they were going to accommodate climate change mitigation and adaptation. And so I think in that sense, though the current sort of framework in which we have to operate is not favorable for us to do the kind of work that we want to do to meet our strategic plan goals, I feel fairly confident that regardless of what happens with the executive order, and maybe you're getting to a question of whether it's challenged in the court or something like that, I do feel like both DLCD and ODOT are far enough along in their process that we are likely to see a new transportation planning rule regardless.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else have any questions or suggestions? I do have one question, actually. It's you had mentioned that King City is going through a similar process on their properties south of, the city's concept plans or the project you guys are doing. Is there going to be any kind of cross connection or discussions between the two, or are we independent pathways?
No, absolutely. There's definitely going to be a lot of coordination between the two cities. And I didn't really cover this in probably enough detail, but we have already started coordination meetings with King City. Of course, we participated as staff on their technical advisory committee for their concept planning when they were in that early stage. And we will be participating on their TAC in their community plan as well. They will be participating in our TAC. And I think beyond just that baseline level coordination, we both know that we have to be responsive to the other cities' goals and priorities because, there's a boundary separating us, but there's a neighborhood joining us. And we understand that we are planning for one cohesive area. And I think one thing that I will share with you all that I think is hopeful is that I think both cities share a vision for this area in that it is walkable. It has local destinations. It's livable. It's equitable. It's a diverse neighborhood. King City, in all their communications with us, has indicated that they share priorities with the city of Tigard on that. And we are, of course, are interested in figuring out how to do that when our projects are in some ways that, well, not in some ways, in very explicit ways, they're in different stages. They're in a much more refined level of planning, and we're at a higher level concept stage. But I don't really have any concerns that we'll be able to come up with something that is to the passive observer who moves between these communities. I don't think they're going to see King City and Tigard. I think they're going to see one neighborhood and one community.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate the update and the questions that we've already had. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot more information as the months come along. So thank you.
Yes.
Hey, Tom, I see you're on. How are you doing?
Hello, good evening, planning commissioners. I'm doing okay now. I'm sorry that I'm late. I don't know, maybe most of you didn't even notice that I was late, but those behind the scenes were certainly aware of it. But yeah, it's good to be with you tonight. It's good to have a meeting. Thanks, Skylar. Maybe just a little, I'd add just a little bit to what Skylar had said, and that is the town center is actually in King City, and it's just across our border. So just to add a little bit more to what Skylar was saying as to why we not only do we want to coordinate with them, but we have to, and that's because the town center is actually on the other side of the border. So we are going to be planning for an area that's going to support that town center. And yeah, I think Skylar did a really good job of laying out kind of what we're envisioning out here, which I think if we do it right and the way we want to get to, this will be an urban growth boundary expansion unlike any other in the region, which is exciting. And that is a more dense, more diverse, more housing diverse, a lot more housing choices, options, and price ranges than we've seen in the traditional urban growth boundary expansion. And you know, if you know the 2040 plan, that was the one that was done back in the 90s by Metro, and it's based on the urban growth boundary and us having a whole series of town centers and regional centers. You know, Washington Square, which you got the update on previously, is a regional center, and they all do different things. Well, if we're going to keep expanding these urban growth boundaries, we have to think about where's the new town center, where's the new, you know, or someday are we going to need a new regional center? And so we've been talking with King City, and we think that's a really appropriate place to have a new town center, which means, you know, a different looking place than a lot of the other urban growth boundary expansions. So I hope you guys are as excited about that as we are. Were there any other comments from anybody on the commission? Questions?
Hey, Tom, this is K7. I had a quick question. What exactly does a town center mean? Is it like a strip mall, or what exactly is a town center?
Town center, is that, remind me, Skylar, I think downtown and Triangle are a town center, are they not? You're on mute, Skylar.
There we go. The town center concept, as Tom was saying, that the 2040 vision that Metro had was this contained urban growth inside the urban growth boundary, and a series of corridors, major transportation corridors, and then at key places like oftentimes intersections of those major corridors, or where there's going to be planned mass transit like light rail, they would have these centers. And some of those were, well, actually at that time, all of them were pre-existing, right? They're trying to decide, well, what's what makes for an area that is likely to be, you know, kind of a downtown area. And if you read through their plan, they have these sort of descriptions of what a regional center is like and what a town center is like. Obviously, a regional center is very big. Two of their regional centers are malls, which is an interesting thought. Obviously, they thought that these areas might redevelop in a way that they haven't yet. But like Tom said, Metro has since that time not really done anything to update that look. And so we've added a lot of land into the urban growth boundary, but we're not thinking about where's that next node, where's that next connection piece. And so that's all this is. It's not literally a town center in the sense that you know, there's going to be a city hall there, although in King City's case, there might be. But you know, as Tom said, the Tiger Triangle, for instance, is a town center. So it's just an area of more intensive development, and I would say a broader range of land uses.
Thank you.
And talking to King City, K7, also another way to answer your question. You know, it's definitely more than a strip mall. It's definitely more than a grocery store and a couple of stores in satellite boxes. They really want downtown. They want a walkable, livable downtown destination. And, you know, they are thinking about moving their city hall out there, maybe some other municipal buildings. And They're putting a lot of thought into it, and I think it's a great idea. I think we need to keep this concept in mind. We need to keep this in mind as the urban growth boundary expands. If we're going to do that, we can't just do, a bunch of low density single dwelling over and over and over again. That's just not going to work with the overall regional plan, plus transportation issues and all of that. So if we can create a walkable area that has destinations and even jobs, and who knows, now that with COVID has got people working at home, I think a lot of people are more comfortable with it, and might be doing it at least a couple days a week more than they had pre-COVID. So there may be, a lot more live at work situations, and those people will want places to walk to or bike to that's close by that has services. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Does that help?
Yes, that was very helpful, both of you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I agree that transportation was the first thing that came to my mind when you mentioned a town center, because we've got a major thing happening down in the Bridgeport area, but that's just a little bit offset from this. So I hope they think about, how are they going to have something that's more robust than a 99W as their transit pipeline.
Yeah, and we're hoping that we can get some densities out here enough to get TriMet to, bring a bus line or two out to this area and support that.
Oh, at the minimum. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Skylar.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Skylar. Tom, are we still going to get an update on a TSP update, or the email that came out this morning, I think it was?
Yeah, if we're ready to move on to the next item, I would like to talk about that and some other related things.
Yeah, no, we're definitely on to other business. I just didn't know if we wanted to add that, if Dave was going to be here, or if you were going to give the update.
Oh, it's actually we're not giving an update on the TSP. I will have Dave do that in the future, so to make sure that you guys do get an update with it. It's just getting started. What David sent out was a ask for any planning commissioners that wanted to volunteer to be on his advisory committee. And that brings up Skylar's also going to be looking for commissioners to be on his advisory committee. In a couple of weeks, you're going to get to meet Hope Pollard, our newest associate planner, and she is doing the it used to be Tigard Employment Lands Tomorrow project, and now it's called Tigard Made, and I will let her explain that to you. But that's essentially the update overhaul, I would say, the complete overhaul of our commercial industrial employment lands to get our employment zoning and lands into the 21st century. And she will no doubt in a couple of months be looking for planning commissioners to be part of her advisory committee. So counting Washington Square, in which but that's 4 major legislative projects that will need planning commissioner volunteerism on. So I believe, I'd kind of like to talk about all of them together if we could, and I'd like to hear from planning commissioners who may be interested, which projects you might be interested in being on the advisory committee. Commissioner Watson is already on the Washington Square Regional Plan District update project, and I know she's shown an interest in the transportation, the TSP update. But I don't want to. I want to spread out the volunteer opportunities there, but I don't want to hold anybody back either. So it'd be nice to know if particular commissioners have interest in particular projects.
So what were the remaining ones again, Tom? I'm sorry, I forgot the names again.
Transportation System Plan Update, the TSP update. So that's very, very, very transportation focused. The concept planning work that Skylar just talked about, River Terrace, urban growth boundary expansion. And then the update or overhaul of our commercial and industrial and employment lands, zones, I should say. What does everybody think? Anybody have
Waiting for hands.
particular,
Commercial industrial zones sounds interesting to me. It's an area that I have no experience in, but that might be a good thing. I don't know. Or not,
Okay.
or if your judgment is no, you need experience in that, that's no problem.
No, absolutely not. No experience necessary. Just, you know, some time and some enthusiasm.
Okay.
I was
Anybody
going to put a push towards these, you know, committee hearings, or being a part of it is a great thing to, one, educate yourself a little bit more on something that might not be it. I was part of the River Terrace, the first phase, as a, you know, representative of the Planning Commission, and helped with that one. I'd volunteer for one as a commissioner, but I am terming out at the end of this year, so I'd like to allow others to do that, and I might actually volunteer on the River Terrace as a resident, just because it is in the back of my neighborhood. But yeah, it's a great opportunity, one, to get out there, get to know, you know, other residents and, you know, maybe, you know, business owners in the area. But one, just to educate yourself and help you be more informed when you're actually coming to these briefings. You can give a little, your 2 cents as well as city staff giving their summary.
Yeah, that's the other thing I'd like to stress is it helps the other planning commissioners because they have to have one of your members who's been part of the whole project throughout the whole thing and can talk to how that process went along and kind of their feelings about the positives and others of the process. I think it's helpful to the rest of the commission.
For what it's worth, I'd be interested in representing the commission on one of them. I can't say that anyone stands out to me at the moment, but.
Okay.
Well, I've worked with Skylar before in CPO stuff, and the guy's been amazing to work with. Wonderful. So I recommend. Oh, he's still here. Sorry, talking about you in the third person. So, you know, if you're looking for somebody to work with him, I'd recommend it.
All right, so I may just throw it out one at a time. So Commissioner Watson has expressed an interest in the TSP, Transportation System Plan update. Are there any other commissioners who are interested in the transportation?
It is fine if somebody else is interested. I don't want to dominate everything. I just wanted to, I just find these things interesting in expanding my understanding of planning issues in the region.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, I think that the transportation one is also very interesting, so I'd be interested in participating. But I did miss the part where you mentioned which ones were super time consuming. So if it's one of those, I don't think I could volunteer, but if it's not, I'd love to join.
I don't think any of them were super time consuming, depending on how probably everybody has a different definition of that maybe, but I'm trying to recall just off the top of my head what David indicated. I think it was.
He noted 4 2-hour meetings is what he plans. Yeah.
2-hour meetings.
Online.
That's not.
Is that per month or per week?
Total.
Wow.
Total. Great, sign me
up. Okay. So for that one, I will talk to Dave and find out if he wants just one commissioner or 2 commissioners. We've done either or with projects over the years. It does, you know. So and then I'll let you know.
Okay, and I'll happily be a backup. I don't want to take Jamie's spot, but if they are looking for additional volunteers, I can be that person.
Okay. Yeah, I'll talk to Dave.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. And I can be the backup that is what works. I have lots to do with Washington Square, so.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, and that takes care of the TSP. So then we have the River Terrace concept planning.
Hey, Tom, this is Craig Shook. Now, I'm an alternate, so I don't know if that's an acceptable volunteer for a committee, but I'd be interested in that one.
Okay, I think it's fine to have you be a part of it, but I think we probably need a voting commissioner to be.
That's what I probably
official
thought.
Commission representative.
Okay.
I would be interested in that.
Okay. We will sign you up, Commissioner Jackson, Commissioner Shook.
Sounds good.
Okay, and then we have time for the Tigered Maid. I'll just use the term that the staff came up with for the title of the project, the Tigered Maid project, the update of the. We have Commissioner Roberts. Any others interested in that? Okay.
I guess I'll
All
put
right.
myself on there as a second if one or the other, probably not both. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Okay.
You don't want to be on 3 committees?
I probably want to, but probably shouldn't.
Okay, appreciate that. All right, thanks everybody. So that's that business. That's good. So we're going to be having a special hearing at a not normal time on the 14th September, which the first is the first Monday was a holiday anyway, so we were going to lose that date. So it makes sense to meet on the 14th. In the future, I see you getting a briefing on the TSP project. We'll get Dave in to talk to you about that, and then we'll get Hope. Well, Hope is already scheduled. It might be the 14th. I think Hope Pollard, our new associate planner, will be here on the 14th to give you an update or an initial introduction to the Tigered Maid project, and she may be asking you for some ideas. So if you have some thoughts about how Tigered can create planning, zoning regulations to, I would say, work with and incentivize the commercial employment opportunities of the future, that would be good to know.
Okay. Quick question. Did we lose an associate planner, or is Hope an incremental add?
We lost an associate planner in the sense that Skylar
yes.
Senior planner.
Yes. Okay.
We got the new senior planner position for the River Terrace project for the concept planning, and Skylar accepted the offer for that position, so that opened up his associate planner position, and so Hope has filled that.
Cool. Congratulations, Skylar.
Tom,
we have.
I think Hope.
Yeah.
I think Hope is scheduled for October, actually.
Oh, is she?
October.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That makes
She's
sense.
not.
October, yeah. September would be a little early for her, so thanks, Doreen, for reminding me.
Yeah, you bet.
We've had planning commission dates jumping around lately, so. Yeah, so just giving you look into the future. The legislative projects are all in full, or almost all in full gear now. So we'll be getting periodic briefings on those. I believe we have another land use case coming up. Don't go away, Doreen. I think it was on the rolling calendar agenda. So Monica has a case that's coming up, and we are juggling dates. This one tonight's hearing got continued to the 14th, and then that was bumping up into the other one. So where did Monica's case end up, Ring?
On October 5th,
yeah.
along with Hope's. That's the PAC trust zone change. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so Starting to get some meetings filled up for the fall. Good. It's good.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have any other business.
All right. Well, thanks, Tom. Looks like we do have a full boat coming up, or at least getting a little more full. Kind of like seeing that. Thank you,
Yeah.
commissioners that volunteered for these committees. It's very helpful to have that on there as well. I know it's time consuming on top of what your planning commission role is, so I do appreciate taking that out of your time, your days as well.
Happy to.
With that, I think that adjourns our meeting. So I appreciate everyone's time, and we will see you next time.
Okay.
All right. See you on the 14th.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.